Welcome back, adventurers. Now, I have been wanting to make this video for a very long time now, because in many ways, it's kind of what started my whole YouTube journey that I'm on. And it all kind of starts 10 years ago. I was on a bus and I was living in Florida, and it was 2 in the morning and I had just clocked off work and was on my way home. And I had this thought, and it was an idea for a story that has since then become my passion project and is the story that I'm working on behind the scenes right now for my fantasy world, and that I hope to release someday soon. But that's kind of a conversation for a different day. But since that fateful night in 2014, I have done a lot of rewriting, a lot of editing, and this idea that I had has evolved, it has changed, it's become more in some ways and less in others. And most of all, I have learned so much since I had that idea and since I have sort of elaborated on that idea and gone through the different iterations for it. So for today's video, I wanted to talk about the biggest lessons that I learned. I wrote lessons here. You can tell I wrote this at 2 in the morning, and how they have shaped me and my world, and maybe, just maybe, it can help you too. Now, before I go any farther, I did want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of this video, World Anvil, but more on that later. Now, the first lesson that I learned when it comes to world building, and something that has been sort of, I guess what I should say, it's the biggest takeaway that you can do with minimal effort, and that is to practice in small doses. You don't need to overwhelm yourself, right? So for me, some of my best world building has happened when I was watching a movie or a show and something in that scene stood out to me that made me want to start asking questions about my own writing. And sometimes it's inspiration that I find in the movie because it makes me realize that somebody had this really interesting take on something, and that then influenced my world, or I was able to think in a different way because I saw that scene. I hope that makes sense. But what I'm trying to say is that even 15 minutes at a time, just jotting down some notes for later can come in really, really handy. So just practice your world building in small doses, because eventually that does compound and it does lead to big changes. Now, the second lesson that I have learned is that every idea can become this nugget of magic that I like to call it. Maybe we can play some kind of a cool sound effect. I don't know what a nugget, maybe a little tinkle, is that the right word? Jingle, sparkle, you know what I'm talking about. Don't give me that look. Now, whenever I have an idea, even random ideas that sound dumb at first, those things can really blossom into something else. And I don't mean be absurd for absurdity's sake, but what I'm trying to say is just be yourself, be creative. Especially if you're starting sort of at the top of your world building, as opposed to like going from like hyper detail out. If you're starting at the top and you're trying to just get general ideas out onto the mat, I guess, go crazy, write everything down, be creative. Something in there is going to spark something later, I promise you. So it's okay if it doesn't sound right. It's okay if the idea isn't perfect. It's okay if you're not 100% sure that it's there. Something that I learned when I was in film school, when I was learning writing, screenwriting specifically. One of my writing teachers told me that if you have an idea, even if it's dumb, there is an idea that you can pull out of there, that there is something good in there because you had that idea, right? All you have to do is refine it. And that's something that I take for every project that I work on. Write everything down, because sometimes you'll go back through some notes and you may just find something very useful. Now, writing things down can be kind of difficult for people. And for me, I'm an excellent note taker. When I say I'm an excellent note taker, you have no idea. But one of the biggest holdups for a lot of people is that they want to become world builders and writers and dungeon masters or whatever. And it's the writing stuff down and the organization part that holds people back, because not everyone is a good note taker, and it shouldn't be a barrier for you. It's just how your brain works, right? Now, for me, World Anvil has been absolutely amazing, and it's what has helped me when it comes to putting things down. And yes, this video is sponsored by them, but I am legitimately having so much fun building my world from the ground up again and seeing the visuals come to life. And that's the great thing about World Anvil for me. And I also just want to preface that by saying that I was using World Anvil in previous campaigns before they reached out to me for this sponsorship. So they are a platform and a product that I get behind. Now, the biggest thing that I've learned after a decade of world building is that my brain, and yours probably as well, is not a wiki. It's not something that you can just access whenever you want. And you're going to swear time and time again that you're going to remember that god's name, that empire's collapse date is baked into your memory, and that one obscure mountain range that you came up with on the fly that caused a war 2 centuries ago is going to stick. And then poof, it's gone. Poof. Poof. Well, that's where World Anvil comes in, at least for me. I use it to keep track of everything in Maladea, my world, and I'm talking about timelines, gods, political factions, the NPC lore, even the messed up family trees and the cursed dynasties. All of that is readily available for me inside of World Anvil, just natively. And what's amazing about it to me is that it's not just built for Dungeon Masters. So if you're a writer, if you're a video game designer, you can use World Anvil for that as well. It's not specific to TTRPGs. So if you are a lore hoarder like me, then World Anvil may just be the thing that you're missing. And the best part is that it doesn't just store the ideas for you to look at or to find, it helps you see connections between them. Now, if you've ever felt overwhelmed by your own lore, or if you're worried that your players might know more about your world than you do, then I suggest you give it a try. So if you want to save 51% on any of the annual memberships, then you can use my code FANTASYFORGE and get 51% off. Go do it. Now, the third lesson that I wanted to pass along is that I wanted it to be have fun, but that's so cliche and very unhelpful, and it's not actionable advice, right? It's some of the most useless advice in my opinion. Have fun. So what I will say is that I'm going to change it instead to make it fun. Whatever that means to you, gamify it. Find a way to reward yourself every time that you world build so that you do it more often. Now, for me, that's World Anvil, because it gives me a little bit of world building that I can do in chunks every single day. It's like playing video games for me. It's just a lot of fun, but it doesn't have to be that for you. The important thing is that you find a system that works for you and that you make it consistent, right? That you do that consistently, and that more than anything, it makes you want to keep coming back. And the kicker here is that once you gamify it, once you do it more often, once you have found a way to make it fun for yourself and you do it for a couple of weeks, it becomes a routine, and then you no longer have to gamify it because it has just become your way of life, your normal everyday thing to do, right? So by making it fun for yourself, you're actually checking off quite a few other of these lessons because you're going to do those more inherently. So make it fun for yourself. Now, lesson 4 is, I think, just a great writing tip, but that's to write what you know. In my opinion, you're going to get burnt out if you try to focus on writing the intricacies of a spaceship engine if you don't even know how to change your own oil, right? So that doesn't mean that you can't write about sci-fi or that you can't build a world or a setting with spaceships. But what I am saying is that if you are more of a narrative writer and you don't know a lot about engineering or rocket science, then focus on the small stories and don't try to sound like a scientist, because it's just not going to work. So write what you know. I think it's just a great writing tip in general, and it's one of the first things that you learn if you ever go to film school or any sort of writing English. I don't know. In the comments, let me know. Am I wrong? Lesson 5 is to be willing to kill off characters or ideas, and ultimately to just not get married to any one idea. And I know that's very difficult for some people, because already I bet you can think of at least 1 or 2 characters that you've created that you could never imagine removing from your stories. But let me tell you that the moment I made one change, right? The moment I decided to remove one of my characters, it changed everything for the world that I have been building. I got through years of roadblock that way because I was able to remove myself from the situation, remove myself from the writing, and look at it from an objective opinion and decide, no, this can be gutted. It changes nothing if the character is a different character. So I guess to give you a little bit of context without giving anything away, I had a character that I was obsessed with. I thought they were really cool, and I had this idea for a backstory that I just wanted them to have. And in my mind, I was like, if I have this character, it is going to be the thing that makes my story. And ultimately what ended up happening is I swapped that character out for a completely different character. And what that did was, by having to rewrite the story from the ground up as opposed to trying to fit this character into my world, I was able to build around that character, which pushed me through all of the things that were holding me back in the past and ultimately made my story move leaps and bounds forward. So if you're struggling right now with any sort of writing block or your world building block, is that a thing? Kill off some characters. Try to write the story from a different angle, using a different character, using a different idea. I promise you'll probably see something that you didn't see before. Now, lesson 6 is being different for the sake of being different is just bad writing. And I know that I am one of those people that has preached about adding diversity and different cultures and stuff into your world, but being different for the sake of being different is just not good writing, right? You're not being creative by deciding you want to make all dragons pink because you're tired of seeing normal colored dragons. What is good writing is saying that they're pink because they have a diet that changes the levels of their carotenoids, carrots, the stuff that makes flamingos pink. This. Right? So what I'm saying is that an idea that's unique should be unique because it's unique, not because you want it to be unique. Does that make sense? Now, lesson 7, to piggyback off of that, is that it's okay to use other ideas, to borrow from other stories. It's okay. It does not make you a bad writer to do that. All writers, all professional writers are going to admit to inspiration from some other source. Now, I'm saying that with a caveat, right? You want to take this with a grain of salt, because what I mean is make it yours. It's okay to be inspired by something. It's okay to like an element of another story and want to incorporate that into yours. But you have to make it unique to you, and you have to make it unique to the voice that you are bringing to the table and to your writing and to your world building. So it's okay to do it, but do it the right way. Now, lesson 8, some of the best stories are in our own history. I'm serious. Read some history books if you haven't. Do the research. Become a nerd for learning, honestly. Be a sponge. You're going to hear some of the craziest stories when you're reading through history. And I promise you're going to find some weird stuff because it's all so foreign and exotic to us, right? It feels strange because nobody has ever lived in a time like ours, right? We have computers. We have access to information. I'm talking to a piece of metal that you are watching this on a screen that is bringing light from the universe and portraying it in front of you in such a mathematical way that all the pixels have formed this image that you're seeing right here. So stare into the void. What I'm saying is that everything else beyond the last 100 years is going to feel so exotic and amazing to us, and you're going to find some really interesting stuff by just going back in time, looking at the way other people lived, at things that other people have done in time, right? I was watching a documentary, and something that was really interesting to me is that at one point, it was commonplace for the British Army to hire 7-year-olds in the military. That was normal. And I'm just amazed by that. And that is something that I'm 100% going to put into my stories because I think it adds a human element. It adds this element that we can relate to because no matter what world you're in, that's kind of shocking to think about. And I think that it would make for some really good conflict in a story. So that's something that I wouldn't have put into my stories, into my world, if I hadn't seen that in history. So yeah, that's one thing. It always ties a good story together. And that's just a good segue into the final lesson, which is, and I think is the most important one that I have learned over the last 10 years, is that it's the human stories that are going to make your world stand out. And I guess another way to put that is that the bottom-up writing makes for more of an effective method for world building than top-down, I guess, for me. Right? It works for me because I think it doesn't really matter how amazing or incredible your idea is. It doesn't matter how unique it is, because if you can never relate it to the reader or to the viewer, you're never going to make a good story, right? And at that, I think you failed as a world builder if that's the case, right? I mean, I guess only if you're doing it for yourself, I guess do you. But if you're doing it because you want to find an audience and you want to find success there, I think that the best thing you can do is to find a way to relate it or write it in a way that we can find an emotional connection to, because we as human beings, I should say I'm an immortal being, but we find comfort in those stories. We find ourselves in those stories and our place in the universe. I'm just going to end that one with an existential moment there for you to contemplate. But I guess those are the biggest lessons that I've learned. Again, I just want to say those are what worked for me and my specific style of world building, right? Those are my methods. If you have your own method, let me know in the comments down below. I want to hear what it is. I think it's really fun to learn how other people world build, because you can always find another perspective, another angle, a new lens to look at things. And it, I think, is one of the best things to do as a writer, especially if you're going through writer's block. So yeah, and now it's time for some quick shout outs. Disgruntled Bob 2812 says, Tobias exerting his Silicon Valley influence. I'm glad somebody finally realized the influence that he has down there. Twin Steel says, I see a kitty cat. Displays her kitty. And Sure Ignanasudaram 5307. Thank you very much for making me say that name. And they wrote, making an item exotic can create a quest to find the expert who can identify what it is and does, especially if the expert, the only expert, has been recently kidnapped. I think that's a great way to start a quest. A fetch quest like that is one of the most iconic ways to really set off a quest, especially if you're looking for more of the traditional fantasy TTRPG stuff. I think that's a great way to get people involved. And with some unique spins, you can really turn it into something else so that they're not even aware that they're doing a fetch quest like that. So yeah, I hope I said your name right. I'm like 99% sure I didn't. As always, thank you so much for watching. Forge on, my friends. And remember, it's time to empty out your bag of holding, you nasty